You're listening to the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast, episode 69, The Battle Between Perfection and Productivity, and why both are needed, but often at different times, and how to know when each one is required. I'm Katie Jones, and with over 15 years in education as an award-winning high school teacher, international external examiner, and as a study coach, I've helped thousands of students skyrocket their results and confidence. And this podcast is where I share all my insights, tactics, and tips with you, the parent, so you can help your hardworking teen get happy, smart, and successful in their study, and have you both enjoy the journey along the way. This is the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. Hi VIPs, I hope you and your teens are doing really well and that you are enjoying the school holidays if you're on school holidays right now, or if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, that the new school year is kicking off and getting off to a great start for you. I personally am loving the school holidays right now. It is my perfect combo of having time to really get into some big projects and get some of those meatier tasks done when I've got more time than during the term, and also getting to do some nice non-work things as well. We're actually about to go on what might well be my most middle-aged trip in my life so far. We're going for a few days to Toowoomba and doing the flower carnival, the festival that's happening there. We're going with some friends, we're taking the dog and staying in an Airbnb and just taking in all of the beautiful flowers, the gardens, and I'm sure some cafes, doing some good walks, all of which are totally up my street, but do, when I put them together in a sentence like that, make me feel like I am more in my early 60s than early 40s. But hey, I'm good with it. Now, this week's episode is one that I'm really excited to share with you. It's taken from our recent Facebook Live, and the reason that I'm so keen to share it with you here on the podcast is because it is a topic that I touch on pretty frequently in all different ways with students. And it's that battle between perfection versus productivity and what's required for best possible results in different situations and scenarios. Because I often see students aiming for perfection when perfection is not only not needed, but in fact is perhaps hindering them and their performance. And then other times not paying enough attention or putting enough effort into getting something as close to perfect as possible when actually that is what they do need to be doing. So I'm going to share here the live nuggets and advice and experience that I shared on that Facebook Live so that you can help guide your teen on using their time, their energy and effort in the most effective and strategic ways in their study so they can also save some of that time and energy for other things in life as well. So let's go with perfection versus productivity. All right, welcome everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with you this evening. It feels like a little while since our last Facebook Live, so I'm absolutely delighted to be spending a few minutes with you here today. So what we're going to talk about, being perfect versus being productive. Being perfect or productive. In other words, are we aiming for perfection or are we aiming for productivity? And as you can probably imagine, the answer is it depends. But of course, I'm going to give you much more than that. So I want us to just think for a moment about times when we have maybe, like I can definitely think back to this myself. I was definitely doing much more of this than I was of this as a student. I put a lot of effort and had a lot of pride in my work. And I will talk about that in a moment. When do we want to what if we don't want to just give in or produce a subpar, let's call it, piece of work and what's going on there? I will definitely cover off on that. I think a lot of the times I didn't know how to be more productive. I didn't know what was going to give me the greatest return on effort. A lot of the times because I didn't truly know where I was getting marks, what I wasn't getting marks for, what was going to get credit, what wasn't. So that's what I want to dive into today. And I first of all want to touch on, because I know that for a lot of you, you have hardworking teens, and you have teens that are putting in a lot of time and energy and effort. Not that there's anything wrong with hard work, but we want to optimize the reward that they get for that effort. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about this want or need sometimes to be perfect. Okay. A lot of the times I see students spending more time on this when they don't need to be. And I want to make a few things clear about that so that hopefully they don't ever spend time on something they don't need to be when they haven't chosen to, and they're not aware that they don't necessarily need to be, but also don't miss out on marks when something does need to be a little bit more perfect. So here's the issues with things being or spending too much time or spending too much focus on trying to be perfect. And you will notice, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but I have done this on purpose. I drew the little guidelines and I was like, I'm going to leave the guidelines on because you can even see where I like mapped out the spacing of the letters so we don't do that thing where it falls off the end. And I've got the nice highlighting until it went a little bit wrong. Honestly, when I drew the clock on there, I was like, oh, that doesn't look as good now. And I was like, wow, if I'm being productive, I'm going to leave it, because I nearly thought, should I write out that card again? And I was like, no, that is not productive. That is not the way that I could best spend my time to give you most value on this session. What I instead spent time doing was thinking about some specific examples I could give you. So there's so many things going on with these cards. You'll see I even chose like the little revision type cards to use for this session, and I've handwritten them, and I'm going to explain all the reasons why I've chosen to do that. It's all very strategic. If you don't know me by now, then I like strategy. And if you don't know me very well, I'm Katie Jones. I have over 17 years experience in education as an award-winning high school teacher, as previously a private tutor, as a exam board marker and scrutiny panel member and writing panel member and coursework moderator. And across multiple countries, I started my teaching career in the UK and then moved over to Australia. I've taught across multiple states in Australia, and I currently work with students mainly in Australia and New Zealand, but also internationally. We have students in Singapore and in international schools. We even have a student in Switzerland and in the UK who I work with to get them more strategic and have them gaining more reward for effort in their study in high school, particularly for those students in years 9 to 12 or 10 to 13. Those are the subjects, the year groups, or the stages, I should really say, of education, where the skills and strategies and techniques that I have learned and gone behind the curtain for in terms of exam board work and assessment and honing and adapting the way I teach and train students, that's where I see this really taking hold. And what I really see a lot of is students spending time on things like these revision cards, making them beautiful, and spending a lot of time on things like writing notes. And what happens, and you've just heard me say it twice, is they're spending a lot of time. And time is one of those things that a lot of busy and hardworking students tell me they do not have enough of. So what I want to do is optimize their use of time so that they can put in their best effort and make things perfect when they need to be, but also hold back from that so they save themselves time to either spend on things in their study that would give them a much better reward, or on other things that they enjoy in their life and give them a better life balance, or just have some time to relax. Or do something else that is not necessarily being productive. And that's the first issue with it, is it takes a lot of time to make something perfect. So sometimes, I'm going to say the word wasting because it's not getting them anything in reward, wasting time on making something perfect. The other thing I see happening with this is what I call perfectionist procrastination. And what they're going to do, and ask me how I know, this is what I did as well as a teenager. And let's be honest, still sometimes do on some things today, just making something look beautiful, because very likely those little tasks, those little actions on making something perfect, most likely and very often have a lower cognitive load than the things that are truly going to move the needle. It's much easier cognitively to make a pretty front cover and spend maybe half an hour changing up the fonts or looking for the perfect image than it is to actually address or address the focus of an essay, or create a thesis statement, or write the actual essay, or analyze the data if it's a scientific report, let's say. let me tell you, there are no marks given for a beautiful front cover on a science report. Just needs to have what it needs to have on the front, the end. So that is what I call perfectionist procrastination. We're spending time on things trying to make those perfect when we really deep down know we probably should be digging into something else. Now, there is nothing wrong with wanting something to look a high standard, but we can make things look high standard without just by, being sophisticated and clear and neat without having to spend hours on them. And the other thing I think that's important to mention is this whole idea of but I want it to look at its very best. Now, as I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with that. And we've got to admire that in students, right? When they have high standards for themselves. Again, this is me to a pretty large extent. But the one thing I do want to emphasize with that is that they are making an informed and reasoned and a decision. I want to say an informed and reasoned decision based on full awareness. That's the real word I wanted to get across there. Are they truly aware that this is going to do nothing or next to nothing for them? Because also the students I see sometimes making those decisions and having those really high standards for themselves, which, like I said, I completely understand, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with it, but they're the ones that are also very often getting stressed because they have so much to do. So I just want it to be a very reasoned and clear decision based on awareness of what is really going on. And if they still choose that they want to spend their time on that thing, that's okay, as long as they like the reason that is based on, and it's not detrimental to other things that are happening for them. Okay, so I wanted to mention that. All right, now, is there a time and place for things that need to be perfect? Absolutely, and I am going to come to that. Now, this is what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about as well, because this is super important, and very often I want to get more students out of this and into this. Not that they're going to lower their standards. Very often, this is the ironic thing, very often their marks will go up when they focus more on what is productive. When I talk about productive, I'm talking about things like getting more stuff done, so they're not spending hours and hours or having this huge long to-do list that they can't get through, and things that truly move the needle. And by move the needle for a student, I mean essentially gets them more marks, hits the higher level criteria on the rubric. Okay, whatever it means for them and their subject and the type of assessment that they're doing. And very often will reduce their stress because they're getting more things done. And very often when we're thinking about being productive, because I'm going to tell you what that really involves, it means that they're a lot more confident in what they're doing. They're not just dashing it off and thinking it will do. It's from a very informed and confident position. Okay, so here's the sort of things that I want to talk about. They need to be aware of what is actually required. So we could also see this as a tick list, but we could also see this as achieving the criteria. What are they truly going to get marks for in whatever it is that they're working on? How significant or how important is that particular task? Again, I'm not saying that there's an excuse to go, oh, well, this doesn't really matter, so I'm not going to do it, even though it might have been set for homework or whatever it might be, but they need to make an informed decision around that. Is, let's just say, finding more evidence required in, let's just say, something like their research. I'm going to come to research in just a second. Is that actually going to get them more marks? Or have they got enough evidence? Do they know how much evidence they need to have in order to hit the level that they want, or the mark that they want, or the grade that they're after in their finished piece? Do they know? Or are they sort of hedging their bets and a little bit unsure? This is why I said they're coming at it from a confident place. That's one thing I want them to really think about. Where am I getting marks? What do I need to do? And do I know what I need to do to hit some of those criteria? The next thing I want them to think about is, and in fact, I'll give you some examples. I'll give you some examples of this. A big one that crossed my mind as I just said that a few seconds ago. I'll give you an exact story, actually, a real example. Jess, who I was coaching, this was a few years ago now. I always remember her mum saying how she would spend hours taking notes. Her mum literally said to me, her notes are like War and Peace. She's got all these pages and pages and pages of notes. And I was working with her on this one task. She knew she was going to be leading up to doing an analytical essay. I think it was on I'm pretty sure it's on it's funny, isn't it, what you remember? I remember this so vividly. It was on The Handmaid's Tale. And so over the holidays, she had to, I think, like watch the whole season and take notes. So can you imagine how many pages of notes she was possibly going to have? And her mum could see this, about to happen. So we worked together and really thought, okay, what are we going to need to do with these notes? We know we're going to have to write an analytical essay. And because she'd worked with me, we know that essays are pretty much always around themes or the main characters. So instead, what we did was drew up a table that had themes, characters, and then every time she saw something, a particular event or something that happened, or even a quote that she wanted to write down, she would just put it in the box. No more just writing out what was happening, not thinking about what am I going to need this for, but just trying to write down all of the information. Made a huge difference. And the other thing I said to Jess was, just let it be messy. I actually want to see your notes be a little bit messy. I don't want them to see that. I don't want to see them perfectly, beautifully written out. Now, she struggled with that part, but she did have a table of information that was already logically worked out because we'd already thought about what is this going to produce? What are we going to need this for? How do we make this most productive? Okay, so that's the one thing. Another thing I want to mention is things like, so that would be research and taking notes. Another thing I want to mention is revision. This is huge. So these cards that get filled up and very often made beautifully into these decorative tiles, it's just not the best use of time. I really want students to consider making their revision notes a lot more condensed, I'm going to say the word messier, and I'll give you another example. I talk a lot, and I won't go into this now. I talk a lot about transforming information to make revision active, but I'm not going to get into that now. One of the examples of this is you can take something that is word-based or verbal-based and maybe turn it visual, okay? And one of the examples that I used to do this for students is when I was teaching geography. I vividly remember, this is why this works, because it sticks in your head. I vividly remember us having to do, it was like the impacts of intensive farming. And for me, like, this was not an interesting topic to teach. I presume that it probably wasn't very interesting for the students to learn. Now, I loved and still do love the subject of geography, but there are some subtopics in there that are not my favorite. So as one of the things, I ended up drawing out like this farmland, and I drew animals. Now you can imagine what that looked like on the board. In fact, I'll give you a little snippet secret here. I'm not creative. I cannot come up with original art, but I'm not a bad drawer. You give me something to copy, like a still life or a picture in a book. I think I'm an actually okay drawer. Okay. But I would intentionally draw them bad on purpose. I drew them bad on purpose because then the students laughed and they remembered it. They remembered, back then I was Miss Price, they remembered Miss Price's terrible drawing of the cattle or whatever else was going on. And we did it together and it was great. But we changed the information from the dry textbook into something visual. We labeled it up, we annotated it with the actual issues, but they remembered it because A, we transformed the information, and B, it was a terrible bad drawing. Now, I could have tried to draw a work of art on the board. It would have taken us twice as long. It would have taken them twice as long. I told them they had to make their drawing as bad as mine because I didn't want the students spending hours drawing beautiful works of art of farmland. I wanted them to get the bare basics on the page so they could focus on the concepts. Okay, the last thing I wanted to mention on that, around the revision and around this idea of drawing or handwriting everything. Now, if there is a real reason that they've had maybe medically or psychologically diagnosed for them where they should be doing that, then of course that's absolutely fine and follow any professional direction that has been given. But in general, a lot of the reasons students give me for typing is A, it looks neater, especially if they do have untidy handwriting, and B, they can get more down on the page. It is faster to type if they're a good typer than it is to handwrite. But this is exactly one of the reasons why handwriting is more efficient and effective when it comes to getting down information or revising. It's basically that. I'm just thinking of how to put this succinctly because there's so many things I could say on the whole handwriting versus typing debate. The thing I will make clear for this session is that because they have to basically rush to get things down more by handwriting, because it's faster to type, it's slower to handwrite for many people, it forces them to condense the information. If they can type as fast as someone is speaking or as fast as the information is coming, They are more likely to copy it out word for word. And that does not require understanding or taking fully in, and processing is the word I'm looking for, processing the information. If they are forced to condense and switch up the wording so that they can get it down in handwriting, that is absolutely so much more effective for them than having a beautiful typed page, but done in their handwriting is going to be, it actually processes better in our brain when we handwrite than when we type, but I won't get into that. But it forces us to condense and switch up the wording of what we're writing, which means that we have to truly understand it. We cannot just write it, copying out and kind of tune out in terms of the cognition in our brain. Okay, so in that case, if we know that taking notes and doing research and doing revision requires us to work, or is when we are best off working productively rather than to perfection, when do we want to be perfect? I will tell you. Ta-da. Notice it's still pretty perfect. So I'll show you in a second. I'll give you behind the scenes. I'll give you the things that I've drawn on the back of the other one. It is only really during extended tasks, and particularly when they are not under timed conditions. So if they have an essay that they are doing in an exam under timed conditions, we do not expect it to be perfect. We expect crossings out, because they should be doing that anyway if they're doing some really good editing at the end. We allow them 1 to 2, maybe 3 minor slips in maybe spelling, punctuation, or grammar. Okay, especially if it's English. If it's a different subject, they're going to be allowed more. Okay, we usually do take into consideration quality of written communication for large extended responses or essays, even in other subjects, but that is not worth, it's not worth taking up time on the actual concepts that we want to be getting in and the quality of the actual content and the concepts and the linkages and the case studies that they're using. If it is not in time conditions, they do need to aim for perfect. They want to proofread, they want to edit, they want to check everything. Again, they might be allowed 1 or 2 minor slips, but it's not going to be much more than that if it has not been under time conditions. They've been able to proofread everything. As long as we can read their writing, it does not have to be beautiful handwriting, as long as we can read it. So again, think about time conditions. We tend to have to write faster. Not a problem, as long as we can literally work out what the words say. And let me tell you, we get pretty good at that after many, 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 many years of marking. Okay, so that is when we really want to aim for perfection. Every other time, we can pretty much get away with being productive. Now, that means we do need to be aware of what we're being marked on and what's going to get us marks and what isn't. But we want to work on things that mean that we get things done and we achieve the marking criteria. So these are things that move the needle and are going to be productive and give us a high return on efforts. These tend to be things that we might be working on for ourselves or individually. And I will also say in short responses on exam papers. Short response questions do not need to have full sentence, beautiful answers written. They need to get to the point and answer the question. Okay, there's a lot more I could say on that, but that's going like drifting off into exam technique. And I won't spend time on that today. So we're talking about being perfect, versus being productive. When we want to choose one over the other, very often we want to go for this. I told you that I would show you my little sketches on the back of this one. This is my example of a terrible, I don't even know, is it a horse? Is it a cow? Is it Superman? Who knows? So we've got turning in lengthy notes into a more productive format that is also faster to do. We've got thinking about drawings, and if it's not a piece, we're not literally in art, sketch it, make it basic, annotate it. Often it'll be more memorable if it's terrible. And handwrite instead of type. Okay, enough with the cards. I would love to take any of your questions. That was quite a long bit of talk by me for these. I don't often do it that long on a Facebook Live, but I ended up with lots that I wanted to share. So those are the ways that I see students spending way more time and effort on making things perfect than they need to be doing, or in my opinion, should be doing. And also those tasks where they do need to be aiming for something at least close to perfection. And after that bit of teaching and sharing on the Facebook Live, we then went to open Q&A and I answered some fantastic questions and we got into some nitty-gritty details. So you can catch all of that, including the Q&A and my responses, on the Facebook Live recording. It is posted on the Rock Solid Study Facebook page, so you can head over there. It's literally at www.facebook.com/rocksolidstudy. And make sure to like and follow that page so that you can get updates on our next live session. I host these open live Q&A sessions on the third Wednesday of each month, and I would love to have you join us at our next Q&A. Have a brilliant rest of your day. I will meet you back here next week for a special audiobook style episode that I have for you. So I'll see you then. Take care. Bye. If you're ready to have your teen achieve their best possible results with less stress, then I want to invite you to enroll them in the 10-week Grade Transformation Program, where they're going to learn the key concepts, skills, and strategies to catapult their performance in assessments and exams. It's risk-free. They either achieve bigger and better results with a whole lot more confidence in 10 weeks, or we refund you in full. Just head over to www.rocksolidstudy.com/program, and I'll see you there.